Welcome to Capital Tiger Bay. I'm Joe Ziffer, President. Now I'll introduce Tim Center, past board chair and president of Capital Tiger Bay, who will now introduce our speaker. Tim?
Please don't get up.
Okay.
Thanks, Gil. Can you hear over there? Okay. Is this any better? I'm going to make sure it works. Good afternoon. It's great to be back with you guys. It's exciting. Good to see you. You guys look really good. And as much as I can see right now, you guys look really good. Hey, so real quick, just to let you know, it's fantastic to have Rick Wilson back with us. This is an encore engagement. I'm very excited. I think everyone's excited for that, Rick and I have a lot in common. We both grew up in Tampa. Rick went to the Snooty High School, Chamberlain, up north of town, in a place they called Carrollwood back in the day. It's still now it's the main part of Tampa. I grew up in this other side of the tracks in South Tampa. That wasn't too good. His wife Molly is an equestrian. His daughter Nora is an equestrian. Their son Barron, just like Andrew. Son Andrew, great family. They all rode at Cavallo Farms with my wife, which is great, and it's really nice to have Rick back as a friend. I've taken Rick here several times as a guest, and just honored to have a true Southern gentleman to be able to join us. Gun owner, a land baron, culinary genius. Rick is just a bon vivant, and he's a guy. It's great to have him home. He's been on the road for several weeks promoting his latest book, Running Against the Devil, which is a behind the music look at Van Halen's album. And really a fantastic sort of thing. He and David Lee Roth, they have some stories to tell you about M&Ms. And no, it's actually a book that's been self-described as an indictment on President Donald Trump. Surprise, surprise. Evidently, Rick and the president have a lot in common. They both love Twitter. You can follow Rick at the Rick Wilson. You'll be joining 750,000 of his closest followers, more than 300,000 tweets. What was even better, as he was promoting his opportunity to be with us today, he said, looking forward to being at Capital Tiger Bay, looking forward to wearing pants. Legitimately, that was his post. He immediately lost 15 people. We had a lot of cancellations just because he was going to wear pants. They both love Rudy Giuliani. This is another story that I think is great. Rick worked for the famous mayor on his re-election campaign, created some award-winning ads back in the 90s. That was 1994, I think it was. It's 97. Okay. Well, there's math involved. I was going to say 26 years ago. 26 years ago. Man, we were young at some point. This is fantastic. I remember that. But he cut his teeth in campaign work here in Florida, originally working for Senator Connie Mack in his campaign, also as a Florida field director for George H.W. Bush. Unlike the president, he is a bona fide conservative. And as a good Southerner like Jeff Foxworthy, he got me thinking. You know, if you're a regular on CNN and on Bill Maher's Real Time on HBO, you might be a never Trumper. I think that's probably about true. And I think when you think about how many times Rick and Mayor Andrew Gillum have been on CNN, I'm glad to see that Tallahassee is finally on the map. This is good stuff. If you write a bestseller called Everything Donald Trump Touches Dies, you might be a never Trumper. I'm thinking that might be a good indication. Rick's got tons of these examples of where this happens, but I was like, let's put it to the test. Let's just take a look at what happened Sunday. Air Force One lands at Daytona International. He drives the beast around the track, tells the people, start your engines, and they cancel the race until the next day. I mean, clearly, you might be onto something here. This is fantastic. And if you happen to help start a super PAC designed to fight Trump's re-election and punish his enablers, well, I think damn sure you're a never Trumper at that point. The Lincoln Project, Rick will tell you more about, has more than $1 million in commitments and includes amongst the supporters and founders the conservative attorney George Conway, who was the husband of Chief Counselor Kellyanne Conway amongst its founders. I think it's clear, Rick is home, Rick is a never Trumper, and I would like to invite you to please join me in giving him a warm Tiger Bay welcome.
So, I am not the ordinary Republican cat in this town. And first off, I want to say thank you to everyone for coming out today. I really appreciate the amazing turnout. and your ongoing support of Tiger Bay, which is one of our great local civic institutions here in Tallahassee. And it's an honor to be back here for a second time. Normally, the second time around, there's normally a restraining order involved in my case. So, I feel kind of fortunate that I'm standing here before you today. So, I want to talk a little bit about my book, which is called Running Against the Devil. And unfortunately, it's low on Van Halen content, I have to admit. Tim teased you with it, but it's low on Van Halen content. But what it is an examination of the fact that as a guy who was in Republican politics for 30 years, here in Florida and across the country, who's been to the rodeo on races from presidential races down to dog catcher, I recognize one thing about this man that I oppose very deeply, and we'll talk more about why I oppose Trump as a conservative in a few minutes. But I recognize there was one thing about the 2020 election, and that was that Donald Trump could not win, but that the Democrats could absolutely set themselves on fire, hit themselves in the head with a hammer, leap off the cliff, and lose. They could do every possible thing in the world to blow a layup. And I got some pushback from Democrats when I initially started saying this. They were like, well, we've got this, no problem. We know how to run an election. Look, Barack Obama. And then came Iowa. And then came New Hampshire. And then a couple days ago, we had the Democratic Party debate, and the sound of like a gazillion fingernails scraping down a blackboard for Democratic Party officials who are now in a state of pure panic that Bernie Sanders will be the nominee. So, being a guy who is occasionally referred to as Rick Stradamus, I mentioned in my book that Bernie Sanders is one thing, and that's re-election insurance for Donald Trump. And they're headlong racing right now into a Sanders nomination for this party. And it's one of the things that I talk about in the book. I go through my 30-year career and I look at how Democrats blow it and how they enter into simple races, and unless they have superstar candidates, they often lose for no reason. And by superstar candidates, I mean a JFK or a Bill Clinton or a Barack Obama. These are people with a natural felicity for politics, a natural understanding of human psychology, a natural way to engage with people, and a natural way to port this charisma that they have into the political process. Anybody see a JFK in this field? Anybody see a Bill Clinton in this field? No, maybe Mike a little bit. Anybody see a Barack Obama? They're not there. So that's why I wrote this book. I wrote it as a guidebook and a roadmap. Because as a conservative, and I know this is often something that makes people kind of get on tilt a little bit, as a conservative, I think Donald Trump is a proximate threat to this country. I think there are a lot of things about Donald Trump that have been very appealing to Republicans, but I think it's kind of like that big Coke party. Friday night it sounds great and you're having a ball, and Saturday there's a dead hooker in the trunk of the car. And I believe that the risks he poses to the country, and not only to the party, but to the country, are so enormous and so consequential that I had to lay out in print for my Democratic friends the simple guidebook to not putting your head in the wood chipper. And I swear they wake up every day and go, that wood chipper sounds great. We should put our heads in that wood chipper. We should touch that hot stove again. And so I go through a lot of different examples and case studies about why they misunderstand their own party, why they misunderstand the Republicans, what the weird appeal of Trump is inside today's GOP, which is sort of a post-ideological party. And it's been greeted very well. Books, second New York Times bestseller, by the way. And by the way, that shit never gets old. The phrase New York Times bestseller, trust me, it will never get old. I'm never letting that one go. There was a day last 2 weeks ago when I was ahead of Michelle Obama on the bestseller list. Like, oh yeah, it won't last, but oh yeah. But this book is about an analysis from somebody from the right who is cold-eyed and objective and has no sentimentality about elections. Democrats have said to me for 2-3 years now, how is it you guys win these races? How is it you do this? What's the trick? What's the secret sauce? What's the dark magic behind all this? And it's pretty simple, really. Republicans are very good at hacking cultural differences to overcome ideological disparities. So when we go into Ohio and you're campaigning among union member Catholics in Southern Ohio, those people are functional Democrats in every way. How do Republicans win those seats down there? How do Republicans win those areas in statewide races? Because the Democratic Party says everyone must be as pro-choice as they are in San Francisco, New York, and Boston. And those Catholics who are Democrats in every way are like, wait, I have problems with that. But they're told their party does not accept them at all. So does GOP go in and say, you have to be for low taxes and all this thing? No, they go and they talk about one little cultural thing. How is it in North Florida did Andrew Gillum suddenly hit the wall in North Florida when he was running a very successful race? Now, yeah, he left some money on the table.
$3 million.
But the fact of the matter was, they start talking about gun control in North Florida in the last 3 weeks of the campaign. Are you out of your damn mind? You know, I pulled the voter file one time, and I ran the concealed carry permit file up against it. We did some analysis on it in Florida. About 1.7 million people in Florida have a concealed carry permit. 35% of them are Democrats. They don't even understand their own audience. They don't get their own base. So Trump was able, in 2016, to brilliantly exploit a whole portfolio of those cultural differentiations, of those cultural gaps, where people who should not, in their personal interest or their economic interest, buy into what he was selling. But in this game of small numbers, he was able to pull, in 3 states, 77,000 voters, in 4 states, a total of 109,000 voters over the line. And in this book, I repeat to the point where I sound like the crazy stalker, I won't be ignored, over and over again. There is only one ball game in this election, and the Democrats hate it. And the ball game is this. It is the Electoral College. I hear this a lot. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 million. You know what that gets you with $4.65? A venti latte at Starbucks. Nothing else. The popular vote is a meaningless, unbelievably dumb statistic. You know what you get for winning California by 30 million people? Nothing. You get California's electoral votes if you win by 1 vote or 20 million. It doesn't matter. The election is over in 35 states. It is over in California. I know how they're going to vote. Nothing's going to change that. I know how Mississippi is going to vote, and nothing's going to change that. So in the 35 states where it's done, a lot of those states are very, very progressive, and also liberal, and somewhat to the left, and socialist adjacent. Also liberal, if I haven't mentioned that before. But in those swing states, where this race will be won and lost, Arizona, Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan, in those states, even the Democrats in those states, and those states all, by the way, lean red-ish or purple-ish. In all those states, we went out and studied the Democrats. I talk about this in the book. The Democrats in those states are not woke. They are not the people on Twitter who are the Bernie bros. They are not far-left activists. They are not Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes. And the reason the Democrats won big in 2018 in Congress wasn't just because Donald Trump is pure poison for politics. He is. But they captured in this whole country 655 seats in 2018. Now, we had won about 2,000 seats over the 20 years in state legislatures, Congress, Senate, the whole rodeo across the country, okay? They lost 650 seats just since Trump's been in office. How did the Democrats gain those seats back? Was it just because they hate Trump? Well, that was a factor. But a bigger factor was people like Nancy Pelosi said, okay, we've got a conservative district in Pennsylvania. So this guy, Connor Lamb, isn't a perfect progressive. He's not right on all of our issues, but he can win the district. Holy hell. And suddenly they pick up 42 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives because they weren't all Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes or Ilhan Omar's. They were Connor Lambs, they were Katie Hills, they were all these people who were much more of a cultural and ideological fit for their districts. Because if you give me 50 Connor Lambs, I can take 50 more House seats. You give me 50 Ocasio-Cortezes, and I can lose 50 more House seats. And that differential is always a big deal that Democrats seem to underestimate. Anyway, the next big pillar of this book, to the point of semi-obsession, and you've got to focus on the real question in elections. People often decide for themselves, oh, I want this election to be about this policy or that policy. I want this election to be about my plan for X or my plan for Y. Well, re-elections are always and only about one thing. Every elected official in this room knows this. If you're running for re-election, it is a referendum on you. What you've done, how you've performed, what the campaign promises you made or broke turn out to be. It's always a referendum on the incumbent. In presidential races, it's even more of a referendum on the incumbent. And the Democrats, finally, I think, are starting to understand that Donald Trump is like a giant black hole, and he sucks in all the attention and the energy and the media and everything else. And it's difficult to break through in any way whatsoever. And that black hole is going to absorb everything. So policy stuff doesn't matter. It's a referendum on Trump. It's a decision, you want 4 more years of this or something different. 4 more years of the same tweeting and the craziness or something different. And that question is one that whoever the Democratic nominee is, they're going to come out with all these plans and policies. You know what a 650-page healthcare plan is? A doorstop. The worst case scenario for a 650-page healthcare plan is that a guy like me working for Trump, an ad maker, let's say, working for Trump. So if I was in that position, I would still do what I used to do. I'd take that 650-page plan. I'd make like a bunch of kids and researchers read it, because I'm not going to read it. I'd make them read it, and I'd find 10 things that scare the crap out of people in that plan. I'd find 10 things that absolutely mortify them. Medicare for all, for instance. You know what the Republicans have turned that into with union voters across the country? They found the thing in there that was the poison pill, which is it cancels private health insurance plans. And labor union guys like the fact that they've negotiated outstanding private, as you could tell, labor union guys like the fact that they've negotiated excellent private health care plans. So when you tell them, hey, by the way, this Medicare for all thing, which is kind of hypothetical and it's going to cost a lot of trillions, also kills off your private health insurance, you just handed Donald Trump about 8 million voters on a plate. Policy kills. Policy is, I know people always want to say, I want to vote for the person with the best policy, the best plan. Voters lie to you and tell you they want that, and they never do. They vote based on personality, they vote based on cultural connection, they vote based on a read of the person's character or of the image that person has crafted for himself or herself. So fighting this out on policy is a dead end for the Democrats, and I warned them against it in this book rather extensively. And I have 2 great case studies on effective policy statements for presidential campaigns. Donald Trump's fit on the top of a trucker hat. Barack Obama's was 2 words, hope, change. It fit on a poster. Policy is a dead end in campaigns. And I wish the world was different. I wish we were having these intellectual arguments about the validity of X policy or Y policy or X healthcare plan or Y climate plan. We're not. And those things don't exist in the actual world of politics. And they certainly don't exist in an era where the distortion machine is so powerful that the entire thing can burst into flame in a hot second when Donald Trump tweets about it. The Green New Deal started out as this plan about climate change. I was in a focus group about a year ago now in Colorado. And people, by the time we hit that focus group, people were like, well, that means the Green New Deal, that's the thing that forbids us from having air transportation and means we can't eat meat anymore. You're thinking, well, that's a terrible distortion of the planet. That's what people start to believe because the media silos work differently now. And a lot of the audiences work very differently, especially a lot of the folks who support Donald Trump. live in a world where their Facebook feeds have been curated specifically to tell them what they want. And it happens on the left also. And they have a television network that tells them what they want and bounds out the degree to which, there's an intellectual debate about it, and it becomes this very visceral, emotional thing. So this campaign is going to be one other thing. I know everybody's really looking forward to this. They're going to be about $1 billion of negative advertising on each side of the equation. Your televisions are going to be like glowing radioactive chunks by the end of this election. It is going to be the nastiest, most brutal, most horrifying election in our modern history by far. There's nothing compares to the coming festivities in this election. And it is going to be one where the Democratic Party has a big choice to make. Are they going to run the campaign they have to run, or the one they want to run? And whatever success I've had in campaigns over the years was because we disciplined ourselves to run the campaigns we had to run rather than what we wanted to run. The success of a lot of other Republicans and candidates and consultants across the country is because they did what was necessary to win, not what they thought in their heads would make them feel good. And they picked candidates who could win, not because they made them feel good. We had a candidate, we helped a guy get elected governor in Vermont 4 times, a Republican. You're thinking, Vermont, that's Bernie Sanders country, that's as far to the left as it gets. Our guy was not a perfect Republican. He was not, he would not pass muster in the Florida House of Representatives, let's say. He would be a fairly liberal Democrat by Florida standards. But did you want a governor in Vermont on the R side or not? Did you want a Republican state senate or not? These questions are often difficult for people to actually look square in the eyes. And do you make compromises with what you believe ideologically to win politically? Because if you don't win politically, you have nothing ideologically. If you let Donald Trump win by putting Bernie Sanders at the top of the ticket, enjoy the apocalypse, because you've done what you thought you wanted, but not what you had to do. Anyway, so I'm going to go to the Q&A part of this now, because I think that's always the most fun, and things get thrown and things get loud. So weapons down, but I am willing to go and talk as long as y'all want.
Okay. There's a microphone here. If you're a Tiger Bay member, you're more than welcome to come up and ask a question.
Is Rick signing? Rick, are you signing books afterwards? Thank Midtown.
And if you haven't figured out and you have a question, you're not a Tiger Bay member, ask one to ask for you.
Tim asked also, am I signing books? I am signing books, and as long as you like, I will sign books and take selfies and do all those things that are now done in the modern book signing world. Yes, ma'am.
With what you just said, what should the Democrats, or who should the Democrats run?
Well, I say this a lot. I say this in the book. I say this until I'm blue in the face. I'm not trying to pick the nominee. I'm just warning that there's one turd in the punch bowl. And as my grandmother used to say, if there's a turd in the punch bowl, it's not punch anymore, honey. Look, I think there are pathways. There are pathways for Mike Bloomberg. There are pathways for Amy Klobuchar. There are pathways for Joe Biden. There are pathways for Pete. I think Elizabeth Warren has. I think Bernie kind of suicide bombered Elizabeth Warren, so I think she's done. She had a great performance the other night, but it doesn't. She's out of money and she's not going to make it much further. So, there are plenty of directions you can go with any of these candidates, especially if the candidate is a representative of a referendum on Trump. Love me or hate me, I'm Mike Bloomberg. Love me or hate me, I'm not him. I'm Pete. Love me or hate me, I'm not him. If they do that properly, it almost doesn't matter. And there's a modern sort of analogy to that in Jimmy Carter, who was a weak candidate, a flawed candidate, a terrible candidate, but he won because Gerald Ford still had the stink of Watergate all over him from Nixon. So, again, I'm not trying to tell them, and one of the things in this book, for my Democratic friends, your policies may be wrong in all kinds of ways. I don't care. I'm not judging the policies you want to advocate one way or the other, except through the lens of, Do they help you or hurt you in defeating Donald Trump? So, thank you.
Thank you.
I think most people forgot about impeachment the day after.
Oh, I have.
No.
Will that be an issue? And an ancillary question, will the Democrats do it again?
Well, since he won't stop criming, I think he's almost inevitably going to get impeached again. I don't know if it's going to happen this year. But the value of impeachment was always bounded by Mitch McConnell. You always knew he was going to put a bullet in this thing the minute it came to him, and with the minimum amount of blood on the floor. He was going to try to choke it out as quick as he could, and he did. And that was the minimum performance that would be allowed under an impeachment trial. He richly deserved it. The Ukraine scandal, the Ukraine situation was an overt attempt to abuse government power, to extort and suborn a foreign government, to do your opposition research for you, and to do a campaign task for you that benefited you politically and personally. Clear, open, and shut case. Now, you don't have 2/3, that's all you can do. You're stuck with the McConnell problem. So impeachment, though, is part of a larger mosaic of the fact that Americans, and even a lot of Republicans, we see this in polling and we see this in focus groups, when they finally kind of start whispering the truth, he earned that because he is corrupt. He earned that because he behaves in ways that abuse the power of the office. And you're going to see a continued pattern of that. What do you see this week with Roger Stone? You see him trying to put his thumb on the scale of justice, which is something a president ought not do. Which is something a president, that's not a use of power, that's an abuse of power. So that mosaic of things he does that are corrupt and corrupting to the system of government we have, I think will play a role in the decisions of some voters. They already have influenced a lot of voters. It's why a lot of suburban voters and educated voters have gone away from the Republican Party in the 2018 and the off-year elections. Thank you.
Assuming we survive 4 years of democratic socialism or 4 more years of Trump, do you see us moving back to the center with more Clintons and Bushes that are more electable, more relatable, and more sound reasonable? Or are we going to run further to the left and right?
So I think there are a couple of possible pathways going forward. One is that you end up with the Republican Party hiving in two, with a Trumpist, nationalist, populist party that is very much about the personality cult aspects of a Trump-style rah-rah, flag-waving, build the wall nationalism. It's ethnically and racially sort of bounded, and that breaks off into a smaller, probably, more traditional Republican Party, which believes in the limited government, the rule of law, sort of the baseline things that were definitionally about the GOP for a long time. Now, the social conservatives will stay with the nationalists, and so you'll end up with two basic parties. I don't know if anybody here is a big fan of German politics. I know I am. There's the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, and the CSU, the Christian Social Union, were the two fundamental Republican-style parties, the conservative parties in Germany. And the CDU was basically mainstream Republicanism, and the CSU was sort of more Trumpy, about immigration, things like that. And now there's AFD, which is just about immigration. But that party, that patchwork mosaic they had to hold their party together kind of fell apart over time. And I think that's what might happen with the GOP. You've also got the Democratic Party, which has drinking its own bathwater, thinking, what's out there in the middle of North Florida and in Iowa cornfields and in working class suburbs of Detroit is a workers' revolution that wants to put the aristocrats to the guillotine. That progressive party may split off and do its own thing with a more mainstream traditional Democratic Party. And the secret of the Democratic Party nationally is it's a lot more moderate than it looks like on TV. Because North Florida Democrats would mostly be seen by the AOCs as bloody mouth Trumpers in a lot of ways. They're not. So I think we may end up with 4 functional parties, which is a scary scenario in a lot of ways, because that ends up with coalition politics like we've never had to do in this country before. As for whether we're going to go back to Bush's and Obama's and Clinton's, well, you want to look at the future. Unfortunately, right now, the mechanisms that have helped divide us and put us in silos, like social media, Facebook in particular, those aren't decreasing in power. Those are becoming more dispositive in how you look at elections. And so I think we're going to end up with edge case candidates for a long time, which will essentially depress the turnout in the middle. And it's hard to organize a nonpartisan system under a long tradition of two-party rule. So it's a tough question. There's also the scenario where we basically live like Mad Max running around the desert in cars and setting shit on fire.
There is this.
Yes, sir.
That was a long answer.
It's a good question.
Okay.
Keep up the standard.
My quicker question probably is a lot of the Democratic candidates are complaining about all these rich people that are running. You have to be a billionaire. But they spend much of their time, an inordinate amount of their time, trying to raise that money to compete at that level. In the future, is it going to, what's the future going to bring? Do you have to have $1 billion minimum to run, or are we going to find some way that if you only have $50 or $100 million, you might still be able to run in the election?
I regret to inform you that the do-gooders who brought us McCain-Feingold unleashed Citizens United, which has said that donations are speech. So that's why you're going to have a class of donors who are billionaires, who are going to give to both sides, by the way, and money is never leaving politics. It is as wired into our DNA as anything else in this country. I don't think we're ever going to get to public financing of campaigns. Nobody's got the political will to do something like that. And I think that you are going to see billionaires who realize there's a toolbox out there that they can buy. If you're a billionaire, your old accessory used to be a Gulfstream 650, and now it's a campaign. So
the day that Trump is no longer president due to the election, or because you can only serve 2 terms, what does the Republican Party do next?
Well, there will be 2 parts of the Republican Party at that point. And again, I still think we may end up with this hiving off of the 2 structural sides of the party, the nationalist populist Trumpists and the traditional conservatives. The day Trump is out of office, whether it is by losing the election and leaving quietly, losing the election and being dragged out by the heels, losing the election by choking and dying of a piece of KFC in his windpipe, whatever the scenario is when he's out, you're going to see a massive number of Republicans, probably 65% of them, who are going to come out and do what I call the Truth and Reconciliation speech. I was just following orders. I couldn't stop myself. I had to. I was scared. Oh, he intimidated me. Oh, I didn't want this. I was working from inside the system to prevent him from doing worse things. Bullshit, bullshit, and bullshit. These people are not brave. They are not men of integrity, and they are going to pay a political price down the line.
Good.
All right. Yes, sir.
You mentioned your work with Giuliani about 25 years ago. Is he the same guy? Or are we just seeing him for the first time?
So here's the long arc of my Giuliani thing. My then partner and I, Adam Goodman, in December of '96, go up to New York, and we're told by everybody, like, national ad agencies want Rudy's work, and all the other big political firms are going to get it. You guys are just being put in here as a favor. Jeb Bush made a phone call for you guys, and he's going to do you a favor, but you're not going to get the work. Well, we got the work, mainly because I'm a bastard, and I just was like shanking everybody else in the competition. And so we did his re-election in '97. Now, this is before America's Mayor. This is as New York is starting to turn around and improve, but it's not all there yet. And the city has a 5-to-1 Democratic registration advantage. So it's a big lift, but we do a great job. And he's a great candidate in '97. We killed it. Won 58.9% of the vote in New York City. Good call. Good work. Hired the right guys. So we go back. We're famous. We do race all over the country. At the end of '98, I get a phone call. And he says, you gotta move back up. I'm like, the what? He said, yeah, I'm gonna run against Hillary in 2000, or gonna run for Senate in 2000. I think Hillary was not quite announced yet. So I went and spent a year and some inside City Hall as a senior advisor to the mayor, whatever the hell that meant. Basically ride around in the truck all day with Rudy. And then we did the Hillary campaign with Rudy. I was the comm strategist for that campaign. And he unfortunately had prostate cancer, which was a huge, it blows up anybody's life. And he had a very public girlfriend, a very public divorce. So it was less viable as a campaign. So I was happy to spend the rest of 2000 working for the Bushes, which was a better outcome. But, so I was around Rudy up close and personal for a long time and stayed very close to the whole Rudy world. And then helped some in 2008. And I wish Rudy, after the 2008 campaign, had formed a foundation and been a tenured chair of American politics or something, or municipal governance at New York University or somewhere. Because you know what they'd be doing right now? They'd be naming high schools after the guy. He'd be a national example because he did two major things in his life. He helped turn around New York City economically and socially from a crime-infested, terrible damn dump where people would shit on the street to the city it is today. And in one crystalline moment, on that September morning, Rudy stood before the country when no one knew what was happening, when no one understood the danger we were in, when we thought there were more attacks coming and more death coming that day, and he led in a singular way, in the way only he could have done it at that moment. And I miss that man so much, because that, to me, was the Rudy that so many people worked for back then. The man working for Trump today is unfortunately an example of my rule of everything Trump touches dies. He started his career as a crusading prosecutor who put scumbags and corrupt public officials in jail. And he's going to end his career surrounded by scumbags in service to a corrupt public official, and he may go to jail. So.
Quick question.
Lightning round.
Do you have any, let me see, economics or insight into what will happen in the Senate races from the leadership, like Mitch McConnell and Susan O'Connor?
Sue Collins.
Will they pay the price for what?
Yeah, Sue Collins is paying the price already. Martha McSally is 6 points upside down in Arizona. Cory Gardner is 11 points back in Colorado. And our group, the Lincoln Project, there are a bunch of us who are, to make the old Liam Neeson joke, we have a particular set of skills. And so our goal is to stop Trump and Trumpism and the people who enable it. So as a contingency, if I can't knock out Donald Trump because the Democrats nominate Bernie Sanders, then I'm going to take away his toys in the Senate. And we're going to do our best to mitigate the damage he can do going forward in the Senate. And so the vulnerable Republican seats, including Tom Tillis, North Carolina, Sue Collins, Cory Gardner, Martha McSally, and a little bit even Joni Ernst now, all these people are starting to feel a little bit of pressure because Trumpism doesn't scale. These guys cannot go out and act like Donald Trump. They can't imitate him, and they don't get the benefit of the Teflon shield around Donald Trump, where he goes out and lies egregiously, and people go, well, that was funny, he's lying egregiously. when a regular candidate does that, they're like, what the hell's wrong with you, scumbag? So, all right.
Okay, that was it.
That was lightning.
The final question would be, your analogy, which is spot on, of cooking it up on Friday night and Saturday morning.
And who among us hasn't? I mean,
Want to know, did that come from a personal experience?
I prefer my book to what I call the Tijuana story. Further, I say not. Thank you so very much for having me today, guys.